Hey, how's it going, YouTube? Welcome to another reading of The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexander Dumas. Today we're going to be doing Chapter 5, The Deputy Procureur de Rue. This is going to be an eventful chapter, I feel. This is where they're going to explain what it is Edmund is being charged for, if I'm not mistaken. In the movie, they covered this a little bit too, where this character is actually one of the main villains as well for the classic film that we watched a couple days ago. So, grab your snacks, grab your blankies. It's time for a classic. Chapter 5, The Deputy Procureur de Rue. In one of the old mansions built by Puget in the Rue de Grand Cours, opposite the Fountain of the Medusa, another betrothal feast was being celebrated on the same day and at the same hour as that which took place in the humble inn. There was, however, a great difference in the company present. Instead of members of the working class and soldiers and sailors, there was to be seen the flowers of Marseilles society, former magistrates who had resigned their office under the usurper's reign, old officers who had deserted their posts to join Condes's army, young men in whom their families had kindled a hatred for the man whom 5 years of exile were to convert into a martyr of 15 years of restoration into a demigod. The guests were still at table. Their heated and excitable conversation betrayed the passion of the period, passions which in the South had been so much more terrible and unrestrained during the past 5 years, since religious hatred had been added to political hatred. The emperor, king of the Isles of Elba, had having held sovereign sway over one half of the world, now reigning over 5 or 6 thousand souls after having heard "Long live Napoleon" uttered by 120 million subjects, and in 10 different languages, the emperor was regarded as a man that was lost to the throne of France forever. The magistrates recounted political blunders. The military officers discussed Moscow and Leipzig. The ladies aired their views on his divorce from Josephine. It was not in the downfall of the man that these royalists rejoiced and gloried, but rather in the annihilation of the principle, for it seemed to them that they were awakening from a dreadful nightmare and were about to enter upon a new life. An old man, the Marquis of Saint Méran, wearing the cross of Saint Louis, rose and proposed the health of King Louis the 18th. The toast, recalling the exile but peace loving King of France, elicited an enthusiastic and almost poetic response. Glasses were raised after the English fashion, and the ladies, taking their bouquets from their dresses, strewed the table with flowers. "Ah," said the Marquise de Saint Méran, "a woman with a forbidding eye, thin lips, and aristocratic and elegant bearing despite her 50 years. If those revolutionists were here who drove us out of our old castles, which they bought for a mere song, and in which we left them to conspire against each other during the reign of terror, they would have to own that true devotion was on our side. We attached ourselves to a grumbling monarchy. They, on the contrary, worshipped the rising sun and made their fortunes, while we lost all we possessed. They would be compelled to own that our king was truly Louis the well beloved to us, while their usurper had never been more to them than Napoleon the accursed. Don't you agree with me, de Villefort? What did you say, madame? I must crave your pardon. I was not listening to the conversation. Leave the young people alone, interposed the old gentleman who had proposed the toast. They are thinking of approaching wedding, and naturally They have more interesting subjects of conversation than politics. I am sorry, mother, said a beautiful fair haired girl with eyes of velvet floating in a pool of mother pearl. I will give up Monsieur de Villefort to you, for I have been monopolizing him for some few minutes. Monsieur de Villefort, my mother is speaking to you. I am at your service, madame. If you would be kind enough to repeat your question, M. de Villefort said. You are forgiven, Renee, said the Marquise with a smile of tenderness that one hardly expected to see on that dry, hard face. I was saying, Villefort, that the Bonapartists had neither our conviction, nor our enthusiasm, nor our devotion. No, madame, but they had fanticism to take the place of all those other virtues. Napoleon is the Mahomet of the West. To all those plebeian but highly ambitious people, he is not only a legislator and a master, he is a type, personification of equality. Equality, exclaimed the Marquise. Napoleon is a personification of equality. Do you know, Villefort, that what you say has a very strong revolutionary flavor? But I excuse you. One cannot expect the son of a Girondin to be quite free from a spice of the old leaven. A deep crimson suffused the countenance of Villefort. It is true that my father was a Girondin, madame, but he did not vote for the king's death. My father was an equal sufferer with yourself during the reign of terror, and he well and nigh lost his head on the same scaffold which saw your father's head fall. True, said Marquise, but they would have mounted the scaffold for reasons diametrically opposed. The proof being that wherein my family have all adhered to the exiled princess, your father lost no time in rallying to the new government, and that after citizen Nodier had been a Girondin, Count Nodier became a senator. Girondin, I think that's how you actually say Girondin, Girondin. Mother, said Renee, you know we agreed not to discuss such painful reminiscence of any more. I quite agree with Mademoiselle de Saint Méran, de Villefort replied. For my own part, I have discarded not only the views, but also the name of my father. My father has been, and possibly still is, a Bonapartist and bears the name of Noitier. I am a royalist and style myself de Villefort. Well said, Villefort, the Marquise replied. I have always urged the Marquise to forget the past, but I have never been able to prevail upon her to do so. I hope you will be more fortunate than I. Very well, then, the Marquise rejoined. Let it be agreed that we forget the past. But Villefort, should be conspirator fall in should a conspirator fall into your hand, remember that there will be so many more eyes watching you, since it is known that you come of a family which is perhaps in league with the conspirators. Alas, madame, Villefort replied, my profession and especially the times in which we live compel me to be severe. I have already had several political prosecutions which have given me the opportunity of proving my convictions. Unfortunately, we have not yet done with such offenders. Don't you think so? The Marquise inquired. I am afraid not. Napoleon on the Isle of Elba is very near to France. His presence there, almost in view of our coast, stimulates the hopes of his partisans. At this moment, a servant entered and whispered something into his ear. Belfort, excusing himself, left the table, returning a few minutes later. Renee, he said, as he looked tenderly on his betrothed, who would have a lawyer for her husband? I have no moment to call my own. I am even called away from my betrothal feast. Why are you called away? The girl asked anxiously. Alas, if I am to believe what they tell me, I have to deal with a grave charge which may very well lead to the scaffold. How dreadful, cried Renee, turning pale. It appears that a little Bonapartist plot has been discovered, Belfort continued. There is the letter of denunciation, and he read as follow. The procureur de Rue is hereby informed by a friend to the throne and to religion that a certain Edmond Dantes, mate on the Pharaon, which arrived this morning from Smyrna, after having touched at Naples, and Porto Ferrangio, have been entrusted by Murat with a letter for the usurpers, and by the usurper with a letter for the Bonapartist party in Paris. Corroboration of this crime can be found on arresting him, for the said letter will be found either on him or at his father's house, or in his cabin on board the Pharaon. But, Rene said, this letter is addressed to the Procureur de Raux, and not to you, and is, moreover, anonymous. You are right, but the Procureur de Raux is absent, so the letter has been handed to his secretary, who has been instructed to open all correspondence. On opening this one, he sent for me, and not finding me, gave orders for the man's arrest. Then the culprit is already arrested, the Marquis said. You mean the accused person, Renee made answer. Then, turning to Villefort, where is the unfortunate man? He is at my house. Then away, my dear boy, said the Marquise. Do not neglect your duty in order to stay with us. Go where the king's service calls you. And that concludes chapter 5. This chapter is all about just this guy, the Procureur de Rue, the deputy. Oddly enough, chapter 5. So it's establishing this guy who is apparently getting married. I wonder if they're trying to draw kind of like mirrors or kind of like reflections of the character of Edmond Dantes in a lot of these characters. They're trying to slap a lot of like similarities between the two, while at the same time present their positions very differently. Whereas Edmond Dantes is the son of a poor man, and is becoming a captain, working his way all the way to the top. This man comes from a very long line of nobles, uh, even more so a part of the Bonapartists. So uh, they were a part of Napoleon's army, and they were kind of like, I guess they're the leftover family after the father was killed for revolution or siding with Napoleon around that time. So he's still kind of technically noble. He has power, but he's under suspicion of like being betraying his country and stuff like that. So he has a lot of responsibility thrown onto him. Oddly enough, they don't talk about his character all too much, though. They don't necessarily say he's righteous too much. They don't talk about his inner thoughts or monologues. It's a like short, um, fairly short chapter, which only gives you kind of like historical backgrounds as to like his family. So I wonder if this is going to touch into chapter 6, which is going to be the examination. They'll probably go into this a little bit more, but maybe it's important to note that some of the stuff that they mention here might end up seeing. You might see it kind of like come to fruition in the next chapter. So you have his eagerness to get back so he can get married because he is having his betrothal feast the same way that Edmund was, or Dante's. So it's interesting to see though. I hope you guys enjoyed that chapter. We're gonna be back for another one tomorrow for the chapter 6. If you're watching from YouTube, make sure you hit that like, subscribe. It helps out the algorithms. There's gonna be some boxes that pop up at the bottom for the Grimm's fairy tales and the tales of horror. Go check those out. A lot of really good stories in there. I will see you all on the next one. Bye. 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 Catch you on the next one.